Hey Cherry Creek, Duncan here. This is the video for the makeup of the reaction types lab in case you missed it or didn't get it done in class. All right, this is the station involving aluminum foil and copper 2 chloride. So this beaker contains copper 2 chloride, which is a nice blue color. So it says that we should add 5 milliliters. So that is 1 milliliter. These are kind of cool pipettes. It has markings along the side of it that show all the way up to 1 milliliter. So you can just use, instead of a graduated cylinder, you can use the pipette to measure 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, we need to add a small piece of aluminum foil. So it says about 1 inch by 1 inch. We crumple that up and toss it in here. We'll let that sit for a few minutes and observe. Alrighty, this is the reaction between silver nitrate and sodium chloride. So we start with silver nitrate. Interesting thing about silver nitrate is if you were to accidentally spill it on your skin, you wouldn't necessarily notice because it looks like a clear liquid, as things often do. But often containers of silver nitrate will be wrapped in tinfoil or aluminum foil to make sure that light doesn't get on them, because light will decompose silver nitrate, turn it into the black silver oxide. So if you spill some on your skin and you don't notice and don't wash it off, when you go outside and the sunlight hits it, it will blacken your skin where you didn't wash off your skin. That is also why it was used in the initial photography. To make a black and white photo, you can use silver nitrate because when it's exposed to light, it will turn black. If I add sodium chloride, 2 drops, that is a little bit hard to see there on the video. It forms inside of it a white powder. It turns opaque and kind of whitish. Okay? So that is what happens with air. Okay, this is the reaction between potassium iodide and lead nitrate. So it says to take potassium iodide first. So we grab just a little bit and we place 2 drops, 1, 2, on there. And then it says to add 2 drops of lead nitrate. Let's get a little closer to watch this. Okay. Here is the instation involving copper 2 nitrate and zinc metal. So there is the flask containing copper 2 nitrate. Here is a container of zinc. We take 1 piece of zinc. It looks like this. Place that on the drop sheet. Then we should add 1 drop of the copper 2 nitrate to the zinc and observe what happens. That is zinc with copper 2 nitrate. Right. This is the station, which is involving the decomposition of hydrogen peroxide with a manganese dioxide catalyst. And a catalyst is a chemical that is involved in helping a chemical reaction, but it isn't actually a part of the chemical reaction. So whenever you have a catalyst, you don't write it as one of the reactants. So this reaction is just hydrogen peroxide when you write the chemical reaction, which is why we know that it is decomposition. In our instructions say to add 2.5 milliliters. This pipette can hold up to 3 milliliters, so I have 2.5 milliliters there. Add that to the small test tube. Then it says to add a very small scoop of manganese dioxide to the test tube. And you really, really do not need much manganese dioxide. There are actually several catalysts that are involved in the decomposition of hydrogen peroxide. Manganese dioxide is one we can use in class. Another one is actually one of the components in your blood. which is why when you pour hydrogen peroxide on a cut as it is disinfecting, it is also fizzing and bubbling. It's this same decomposition reaction. It's just catalyzed instead of by manganese dioxide, but by some of the chemicals inside your blood. All right. Here is the reaction of iron with oxygen. So I took a bit of steel wool and put it inside this glass container, and when I touch it with a battery, it reacts kind of impressively. So that is iron reacting with oxygen. This station is the burning of ethanol. It is the final one. Regardless of whether you did this in class or not, I would do this one as a demo. So we have an ethanol lamp here. So if I light that, then it is on fire. Now, we used these last semester, which is not terribly thrilling. We have seen combustion before, but the bit I wanted to add during this, this lab experiment is a little bit more information about fire and how what's called a diffusion flame works. Now, when we look at the fire, right now we just see this flame, right? And every fire needs, as we know, a fuel, which in this case is ethanol, and oxygen. So the question I have is why the fire doesn't spread everywhere into the whole room, and that's just because there's no fuel in the room. There's just oxygen. And the flip side to that is, why doesn't the fire go back down into the reservoir and light all of the ethanol on fire all at once, and then that'll all just blow up? And the answer is the exact opposite. There's ethanol in there, but there's no oxygen. And if you don't have both, you don't have fire. So the fire can only exist where the ethanol and the oxygen meet. But that is an interesting, like, logical result there, which is to say, if here and by the wick is all ethanol and no oxygen, that says there can be no fire there. And outside in the room, there's oxygen but no ethanol, which means there can be no fire there. So the fire can only exist at the interface, which, if we look at that, means that you can see the fire kind of bends away from the wick. It's not actually touching the wick because there's a cloud of ethanol coming out of the wick, which doesn't have any oxygen and it doesn't burn. So that means that this flame, and any flame of what's called a diffusion flame, where the fuel has to go meet the oxygen, will be hollow. And that's hard to see because it's three-dimensional. No matter how you look at it, it looks like it's a solid flame. So what you can do is, if you take a piece of metal and put it over, you can see a ring. That ring in the fire is because on the inside there's ethanol but no oxygen, and on the outside there's oxygen but no ethanol, and the fire truly does only happen at the interface. It is a hollow cone of fire. Inside is actually not on fire. Inside the flame is not on fire. That's just ethanol. Outside the flame is not on fire. That is just oxygen. The flame truly is a hollow interface between the fuel of the ethanol and the oxygen in the air that allows them to come together and burn. And I think that is just super duper cool. You can do that with a lighter, with a match, with anything where the fuel has to go meet the oxygen of the air. You're going to get this hollow flame type. And so I just wanted to show you that, in addition to talking about combustion. Here is an extra bit of information, which is kind of cool, for the reaction of peroxide decomposing with the catalyst of manganese dioxide. Now, after you've done that reaction, hopefully you realize that what's the peroxide is breaking down into is water and oxygen. So when it's bubbling, like we saw in the earlier bit of the video for this station, it's bubbling, it's fizzing, and it's producing oxygen. Now, the thing about oxygen is it helps things that are burning. So if I take a match and I light a toothpick on fire. Okay. So when it burns, Okay, you'll see that red ember kind of at the end. And when I blow it out, that ember is still kind of there. Now, if you stick that into a container of oxygen, that will provide a lot more energy, or sorry, a lot more oxygen for the fire, and can actually reignite we call it a wooden splint. Okay, so I will put the manganese in there. So now that is producing oxygen. And this is actually the standard test for whether or not you are producing oxygen. What you do is you light the splint, and then you let it go out, and then put it in, and it relights. So a ember split, when in the presence of oxygen, will relight itself, because that splint starts to burn a lot faster and a lot better because of the extra oxygen present, and it will relight.